to bring forward the live feed.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I can confirm your live streaming.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting on May the 9th. Beginning on March 1st, 2022, the City of Kitchener has aligned with provincial changes to COVID-19 restrictions, and City Hall is now open for in-person services, but appointments are still being encouraged. The city remains committed to the safety of our patrons and staff and continues to facilitate electronic meeting participation for members of the public. Those people interested in participating in future meetings can register to participate electronically by completing the online delegation registration form at www.kitchener.ca/delegation or via email at delegation@kitchener.ca. For those who are interested in accessing the meeting live stream video, it is available at www.kitchener.ca/watchnow. Any written comments that have been received ahead of the meeting have been circulated prior to the meeting to council and will form part of the public record. We'll now begin as we normally do with our land acknowledgement, and I'd like to remind council and all participants that this evening we're gathering on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. We recognize our responsibility to serve as stewards for the land and honor the original caretakers who came before us. Our community is enriched by the enduring knowledge and deep-rooted traditions of the diverse First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Kitchener today. And now I would like to invite everyone to stand as they're able for the singing of our national anthem, O Canada, and just a reminder to folks to turn off their video so there's no awkward shots. Thank you. Just a moment, please. We're having a technical difficulty with the sound. Well, thank you very much to the members of KW Glee. They actually recorded that rendition for Canada Day in 2020 at the start of our pandemic, and it formed part of a CTV City of Kitchener Canada Day special, and we continue to use that version of the anthem now at our meetings. Move on to item number 2, minutes for approval. On motion by Councillor Marsh, the minutes of the regular meeting held April 11th, 2022, and the special meetings held April 11th and 25th is mailed to the mayor and councillors, were accepted. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Councillor Johnson.
Yes, thank you. And sorry, I was just trying to pull up my minutes there for the item, but it's about the digital squad and my employment and cooperative education. So I will fill out the proper forms and give to the clerk.
Okay, sorry, just to be clear, which item was that?
About the digital skills squad for the small business center.
Oh, okay, that would be item 7.2A.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any others? There being none, we'll move on. Note the communications being referred to file with respect to the flag requests. There are no presentations, but there are delegations this evening. We'll now proceed with the delegations as listed on the agenda. I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. You'll be made a panelist prior to your name being called. Once you've joined the meeting as a panelist, you will have access to your microphone and camera. Please leave your video and camera turned off and your microphone audio muted until you're called upon to speak. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting, interrupting members of council, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about members of council, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and or hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon the opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And we'll begin with item 6.1, which is the Kitchener Power Corp annual business matters and the update that comes. And I'd like to welcome Jerry Van Oudegem, President and CEO of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, and Jim Phillips, the chair of Kitchener Power Corp, for this evening's meetings. And I'm not sure which one of you's starting. I think it might be Jim, and we'll take it from there. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On behalf of Kitchener Power Corp and Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro, I'd like to thank council once again this evening for time on your agenda. It is a pleasure this evening to be speaking in some ways about things other than potential mergers. Tonight we get to dwell on the year that was 2021 and the operations of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro specifically. Our boards are very proud of our staff and management who, despite all of the challenges presented by COVID, community growth, and other developments, provided quality, dependable, efficient, and economical hydro services that powered our community while also generating dividends for our shareholders. And with that brief introduction, I'll pass things on to Jerry, and he'll do our annual report presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening. Mayor Vrbanovic, councillors, senior staff, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present to you this evening the 2021 annual report for Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro. Next slide. As usual, I'll start with some statistics for 2021. We reached a milestone in 2021 and now serve just over 100,000 customers. We added 1,027 new customers during the year. The year 2021 was a return to a more normal year for energy consumption and peak demand. Overall energy consumption was up ever so slightly by 0.1%. Peak demand was lower, but that was primarily due to a more moderate weather last year compared to the year before. Next slide. Or maybe not.
I think we got some technical difficulties.
I'll get started and we can catch up on the slides. So our total revenue and our total expenses for the year were both less than the previous year, primarily because of some legislated billing changes to remove some of the costs for large customers from the rate base to the tax base, effective January 1 last year. There was also a temporary rate reduction for COVID that was in place in January and February during the year. Approximately 80% of our total revenue and total expenses are electric energy charges that we collect and pay on behalf of third parties. Of the total revenue, KW Hydro's distribution revenue was 44.8 million last year, and operating expenses were 37.3 million. Net income for the year was 11.4 million, which was an increase of $460,000 from 2020, which was 11 million. That is our best year ever, but it is not sustainable, as our CFO reminds me, and that the good returns are primarily due to lower taxes that we paid last year due to the CIS project. Next slide. So capital expenditures for new plant and equipment amounted to just over $26 million in 21. 11.4 million of that was for system renewal projects. Those are transformer station upgrades or pole line rebuilds, underground cable replacements. 8.3 million is for other capital investments such as information technology, vehicles, buildings, tools, and equipment. And the remaining 6.4 million are for customer-driven projects, subdivisions, developments, road relocations, and other services. Next slide. Already mentioned that our operating expenses for the year were 37.3 million. Of that amount, our controllable expenses for the year, which is the largest share of this pie, amounted to 22.4 million and represents 60% of our total operating expense. This equates to $224.22 per customer, or a 4.3% increase over the previous year. Other expenses include interest, property taxes, and amortization expense of 14 million, and conservation and demand management expense of 1.3 million, and corporate income taxes, which actually were negative by 400,000 last year because of that CIS project and the SHRED credit we received for that. Next slide. So here's a comparison of our controllable cost per customer compared with other utilities and comparable utilities. This you will notice for 2020 because that's the most recent published statistics from the Ontario Energy Board. And our controllable costs were the third lowest in the province in 2020. I mentioned previously that our controllable costs for last year were $224. Next slide. So how does that translate into rates? Well, rates for a typical 700 kilowatt hour residential customer are $107.20, and that's effective January 1st, 2022, after the 17% Ontario electricity rebate. Kitchener-Willmott Hydro's portion of the average residential bill for distribution charges is $25.69, or 20% of the total bill. The remainder are those third-party charges that I mentioned before that we collect and pay on behalf of others. Slide. So how do our monthly residential bills compare to that of other local distribution companies? You can see that as of January 1st, 2022, we had the second lowest residential rates in the province. So certainly the focus on cost control and our low controllable costs directly translates into competitive bills for our customers. Next slide. So this slide shows some of our reliability performance indicators, and there are three particular ones that are typically compared and measured between utilities. So the first one shows, so altogether on average, each customer in our system experiences less than one power outage lasting approximately 34 minutes in a year. And that's when you exclude major events. In 2021, we had two major weather-related windstorm events, one in June, on June 29th, and another on December 11th. So those numbers are not reflected in this total as per direction from the Ontario Energy Board. The main cause of our reliability issues was equipment failures, if you exclude the weather-related events. And of those, submersible transformer failures continue to be a significant source of outages for us. Next slide. There are also several service quality indicators that we track, 10 in total actually. These 5 are the ones that we regularly compare year to year. And once again, we've exceeded the OEB minimum standard that you see in the middle there on all of our indices. I would like to talk a little bit about the telephone accessibility statistic, which declined to 74% in 2021. And that's because we experienced a 23% increase in call volume over 2020 due to the switch over to our new customer information system. We were still exhibiting acceptable performance below our previous targets for the year. We are seeing a return and some improvement in these numbers. And as of the end of March, we were back up over 80% on this statistic. Next slide. So just to talk about a couple of the major impacts in 2021. Of course, the ongoing impact of COVID-19 has affected us all, and we continue to have a hybrid work from home, work from office arrangement for office staff. And we adjusted those levels several times during the year in accordance with public health guidelines. And currently we're 4 days per week at the office. We still have some crews reporting to remote locations at our transformer stations as well to keep our crews separated. But by far the largest ongoing impact due to COVID is with supply chain issues, which includes both cost and delivery impacts. Some purchases and materials that had delivery lead times of 2 to 4 weeks are now several months. And in fact, we have a truck that we ordered in 2020 that we're still waiting for that we haven't received yet. Material prices have also increased significantly from pre-pandemic. Transformer prices have increased between 35 and 60%, wire and cable 40 to 60%, and some underground pipe by over 100% since the beginning of the pandemic. Next slide. So a major initiative for us over the last 2 years was the replacement of our 30-plus-year-old legacy customer information system with the new Oracle customer care and billing system. The new system went live on September 27, 2021. Many thanks to our dedicated and resilient implementation team to complete this project during a pandemic. Almost 2,000 business requirements were evaluated and 240 million data records were converted as part of this effort. A new bill design was also implemented as part of this upgrade. Next slide. After many months of study and due diligence, as the chair mentioned, and a public consultation process in October last year, the 5 municipal shareholders of the holding companies of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro and Waterloo North Hydro approved proceeding with a proposed merger of our 2 companies. A merger application was submitted to the Ontario Energy Board in January of this year, and we are currently working through the interrogatory process with interveners. We expect a decision sometime early summer and a possible closing date in Q3 this year. In the meantime, work has commenced on the integration process with a number of integration teams working through the merger. Next slide. So there are a number of community initiatives that we continue to support. Local charities, both with corporate support and employee donations. We sponsor 2 awards at Conestoga College and continue to do so, as well as our sponsorship with Center in the Square. We provided in-kind support to the Mike Shout Wetlands Preserve in New Hamburg and for a better tent city on our Delta Ave. And we once again provided tree reforestation grants to both the City of Kitchener and the Township of Wilmot in 2021. Next slide. That ends my presentation for this evening. I would like to thank all of our staff for their support in what was another very busy year and through another year of COVID. I would also like to thank our board and especially our chair and vice chair and Mr. Chapman and Mr. Lautenbach for all of their help in evaluating the merger with Waterloo North Hydro. Normally, this is when our chair would present checks for the dividends and reforestation grants. However, once again this year, they have been provided by EFT. So that the chair and I would now both be pleased to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you for your attention.
Well, thanks very much, Jerry, and thanks, Jim, to both of you and the rest of the board. Thanks as well for your patience for a little bit of a late start this evening. Our caucus session ran a little late, but certainly very impressive with what the hydro company's been able to achieve operationally this year, continuing through the pandemic and all of the challenges that it provides, in addition to obviously the work that's been done with the pending merger with Waterloo North Hydro, and certainly very excited to see that work continue to move forward in a timely way. So on behalf of council, thank you for that, as well as the electronic funds transfer. It's so much more fun when you show up with a check and we get to have all the hoopla. So we might have to do that afterwards, just for the heck of it. But with that, we do have some questions, and we'll start with Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of questions. Your performance is tremendous. I take it these are the financial statements we're going into the amalgamation with?
Yeah, the last full year, there'll be a stub year that we'll have to do a final audit with, which will happen depending on the closing date, and any closing adjustments will be based on those final statements.
Your ranking on various issues is amazing. When we become amalgamated, do you see yourselves maintaining those high standards, or is there something that would cause them to deteriorate somewhat?
I think it'll be hard to keep our position where we are, but saying that, Waterloo North Hydro's performance is also pretty good, and given the fact that we're the larger entity and that there are efficiencies that we expect to gain as part of this merger process, I think we will still be very competitive when we're all through this.
On one of those schedules, your ranking was third. There were two properties above you. Hawkesbury or something was one of them. Are they the two properties? Are they smaller operations than your operation?
Very, very much smaller. I think Hydro Hawkesbury is always our toughest competitor, and they're a very small utility out by Ottawa. They have some large industrial load at that utility, so they've been able to keep their rates very low. I don't know exactly, but it's under 5,000 customers that they would have. And then I think the other one was the utility out Windsor Way, which is S6 Leamington and Kingsville. So they're a smaller utility as well out in that direction. And this year they've had very, very low rates. So they're not always, that low, but there must have been some special rate rider to bring their rates down that low this year.
A couple other questions. You appear to have done some magic with income taxes. What happened there? Normally, income taxes don't go down.
No, never. Property or corporate taxes or personal taxes for sure. So our new customer information system that we finally were able to bring into service in 2021 qualified for what they call a SHRED credit, which is a scientific research credit program that the federal government offers. And it actually lowered our taxes, I think, by about $1.5 million owing for the year. So that's an anomaly. That's not something that you can expect very often, but it's because of this new investment we made in this leading CIS system that we were able to take advantage of that tax credit.
It's commendable that we got a new system out of it, and at the same time save some income taxes. So very well done. One of my last point is I saw in one of the schedules to do with the telephone calls, and then on the left it said 30 seconds. Does that mean that your staff responded to a call within 30 seconds of that call being made?
So that's the standard that is that we have to measure against, is how many of the calls that we receive do we respond to in person within 30 seconds of the call coming in. And of course, we don't get them all. And we had a real peak in calls, in September, October, November, when the new system went in. Not just because of the new system, but because of the new bill format as well. And so it's hard to staff up for a peak in a short period of time like that. But that is what that statistic is, answered in person within 30 seconds.
Believe me, going through COVID-19 and having to use the phone more often, those are amazing statistics. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Singh, you're up next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and just want to echo your comments earlier. Having had the pleasure to sit on the board along with you and Councillor Schneider, we were able to see firsthand the level of commitment and time that was required to commandeer through the, I guess, the merger process. And Jerry, and Jim, to you both, of all that effort that you put in, it's incredibly appreciated by the overall community, as well as leading very well along with the rest of Kitchener-Wilmot Hydro staff and coordinating with our city staff. So once more, many thanks to you. We're definitely at a fantastic space. I'm quite confident. Councillor Gazzola asked about those standards proceeding forward. I think the culture, Jerry, especially yourself, that you were able to help instill within the corporation will hopefully, and I'm sure confidently will, transition into the merged new co. So thank you for having your signature on that. My question is more towards the gifts that you're presenting today, with the assistance that you provide to Center in the Square, as well as the funding that you provide through the reforestation grant, which are much needed dollars and go towards assisting with good initiatives. Can we continue on expecting this partnership to carry forward under the amalgamated companies?
Yes, certainly both parties are very supportive of continuing, these community initiatives. They're important for both parties. They're important for us to, support the community that supports us. And likewise, we're happy that we're able to do so. And certainly I know in speaking with Waterloo North Hydro, they feel the very same way about some of the initiatives that they're supporting. So I fully expect that, this will continue. In fact, the reforestation grants are actually, we've actually committed to that in the merger participation agreement to continue providing those, and that they'll be provided to all of the municipalities. So we're happy to be able to do so. And thank you so much for your kind words. It's certainly not just me. We have a great team over here. Everybody deserves the credit. And when we were tied up and busy with merger evaluations, I mean, the rest of the team carried on, as we've come to know. So many thanks go to all of them.
Thank you again. I'll just ask one other question, and that'll be it. With my final thanks to both you, Jim and Jerry, is with the amalgamated codes, do you see perhaps opportunities in the future where there could be synergies of additional partnerships with the local municipalities towards environmental initiatives, especially through energy generation, and especially the fact that Kitchener has its own gas utility, which is unique on its own, and perhaps opening up opportunities with partnerships with that utility company. Thank you. I'll leave it there.
I'll respond quickly to that by saying yes, Jerry, from a governance perspective. Paul, I think this sets the new companies up very well for a future. Also, obviously, through the affiliate of GRE, we're very much looking forward to partnerships with the municipalities and others right here in the region of Waterloo for sure. And lots to be done in the energy sector. And I think we very much want to be a part of that.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. We'll now move on to Councillor Chapman.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the report. I just wanted to ask if you could give us some more information on the reforestation grants, like who qualifies and how would one go about getting them? Or is this an internal thing, or is it open to the public to apply for grant money?
No, this is grants that we strictly provide to our municipalities so that they can do the tree plantings, really because we have to trim trees, on the public right-of-ways in order to keep people safe from the wires. This is a way that we can give back to the communities, both the municipality of City of Kitchener and the Township of Wilmot, who own the trees on the public road allowance, which are the ones that we're trimming. So these are grants that we've been providing for over 20 years now to the municipalities, but they're only available to the municipalities.
Okay, maybe staff can just tell us how that money then gets channeled through to the tree canopy program or not, or what program it goes through. Thanks, Denise.
Through the mayor to Councillor Chapman. So as part of the reforestation grants, now provides some indication in terms of where the funding is going. And as you know, we have a aggressive tree planting plan to address the backlog as a result of the emerald ash borer. And so primarily the funds are going to replace trees and grow the urban forest canopy.
Okay, thank you.
Are those all the questions, Councillor Chapman? Yep.
Yes, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Those appear to be all the questions, gentlemen. So again, on behalf of council, thank you very much for all of your efforts, and also much appreciation for the electronic funds transfer. I'm sure all those dollars will be put to good use by our team. And I know we do have a motion that we need to consider coming out of this, and that's the reappointment of the auditors. And that's that KPMG LLP be appointed as the auditors of Kitchener Power Corp for the ensuing fiscal year, and that the directors are authorized to set their remuneration. Whoops, where'd my screen go? Does somebody care to move that? Councillor Gazzola, are you moving that?
Yes, I would like to move that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder? Councillor Davey, thank you. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We then will move on to the next item, which has to do with the board for the new entity. Jim, were you going to speak to that, or?
Yeah, I'll start that off, Barry. I'm certainly being very cognizant of your time this evening. I'll just summarize the staff report that you received in your package. I think was very comprehensive in terms of a lot of the background. So by way of introducing this item, since the MPA approval happened last December, our Project Grand River Joint Steering Committee, I'll refer to it as the JSC for short in the presentation, has been at work on a lengthy list of items that some are planning, some are decision-making like that will ultimately be approved by the new boards when they're constituted, hopefully come September. Q3, as Jerry said, is what we're working towards. But one of the areas that we have spent a lot of time on is populating the new boards as well as populating the committees. And you've received prior information on some of that work. Certainly, in terms of the new boards, as you're aware, it was recommended some time back that as much as possible, we ensure that there's continuity in corporate knowledge that continues on when these new boards are created and for the first term of the new boards. And as a result of that, a number of individuals that have been previously on the current Holdco and WiresCo boards will also be serving on the new boards. In terms of numbers, the new Holdco board, and I think 3 of the elements of your motion that you'll be considering in a few minutes relate to Holdco, not WiresCo, but the new Holdco board will have a total of 13 members. 7 of those will be independents and 6 non-independents. And because City of Kitchener, of course, will be the majority shareholder of the new corporation, of those 13 board positions, there will be 4 independent members nominated, appointed by the City of Kitchener, and then there will be 3 non-independents, also City of Kitchener. So that's 7 of the total 13. So that really leads us to the focus we wanted to have for our presentation to you tonight. Of those 4 independent positions on the Holdco board that are to be appointed by the City of Kitchener, And in keeping with the recommendation that the current 2 members of the KPC board would be appointed onto that new board, those 2 members being Rosa Lupo and myself, that gives us, I think, the envious situation of having 2 new board positions to be filled. That's not happening for the other shareholders. It is happening for the City of Kitchener by the gain of the 2 positions. So as was summarized, I believe in the package you received, because the new boards don't exist yet and won't for several months. Also, the committees, normally there, of course, would be a nominating committee process. Well, that nominating committee, when you're starting with a new board that doesn't yet exist, that process doesn't happen either. So it was the recommendation of our joint steering committee that a small working group come together to serve as the recruitment committee. 3 of us were appointed to that recruitment committee, and we are 3 members of the current KPC as appointed by Kitchener, those being Rosa Lupo, Jerry, and myself. So over the past month and a bit, we have gone through a search process. We initially, of course, did fairly broad-based advertising and other promotion. We had over 40 applicants for those 2 positions. That's the greatest number we've ever had for a holdco or KWHI board in terms of response of applicants. And I think it's just an indicator of, how exciting this new opportunity is of creating new corporations and new boards, that we had attracted that type of attention. So from those 40 applicants, we vetted all applicants against our 10 competencies that were set out in our Holdco competency and skills matrix. And we also developed a methodology to try to come up with a mathematical formula to get to a short list. So by working through that process, we ended up with 5 candidates for interview, and those interviews were conducted by the recruitment committee. We also did, of course, subsequent reference checking on 2 of the candidates, the 2 that we have for recommendation to you tonight. And we've also ensured that both of these candidates, including being our recommended candidates, are also eligible to serve on the new Holdco board. There are requirements under the new shareholders agreement that board members cannot be a close relative of an employee of any of the 5 shareholders. So that would include City of Kitchener, but also City of Waterloo and the 3 townships. So we've ensured that is not the case in the 2 candidates that we're bringing to you tonight. We're very pleased and very excited about these candidates, both in the skills and competencies that they bring, the experience they've had in their careers, as well as being a part of governance in other organizations, but also in the fresh thinking that they bring. Again, these will be 2 new board members on a board that's really populated based on continuity and corporate knowledge, and will be there for the first term until perhaps such time as turnover starts to happen. And new board members will again be joining us. So we certainly highly recommend to you Susan Taves and Brian Unrau. I think there was a summary contained in the briefing note that we had sent through to you with the backgrounds of both of those individuals. Both individuals do work in the City of Kitchener. One of the preference we expressed in our advertising and in discussions with the candidates was that the individuals live or work, preferably both perhaps, but at least one or the other in the City of Kitchener. And both of these individuals do work in the City of Kitchener. So with those brief comments and the background you already had, I'll perhaps stop at that point and would be pleased to respond to any questions you may have.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jim. And we do have a couple sets of questions, and then we'll come forward to the recommendations. One to deal with all of the recommendations except for the council one, where we have to have a vote, and then we need to nominate someone, and then we'll deal with that one last. So, Councillor Marsh, questions?
Yes. Actually, I don't have any questions. I just had a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate you, Jim and Jerry, and the nominating team for finding such impressive looking candidates that were the successful candidates. It must have been, so it must have been a tough decision. I'm sure you had excellent candidates, but these two, both chartered professional accountants with such a wealth of experience, I think that's a really great background to lead us in the new merger. So well done. And Mr. Mayor, at the appropriate time, I do have a recommendation for a nomination to come, if you can come back to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to move the recommended appointees. So as in the staff report, as well as I was going to make a recommendation from the council nomination as well. So if you'd like me to do the later set afterwards, I can.
Yeah, so I'll start with then, I'll take your moving of the balance of the report, except that last council one. And I will just note for everyone's interest as we go into the new board, both for the two existing appointees who are moving over from the existing board to the new one, and the one additional one that we have to add. All of those folks will actually, as part of the process, be signing a document that indicates that if you don't run or you're not reelected, that you would resign from that position. And obviously, if you are reelected, then it'll continue on till the next fiscal year, which is in June of next year. So with that, Councillor Singh, you're moving the balance of the report, other than the one item, and I'm going to come back to that, to Councillor Marsh's motion for that one item, and I'll open the floor to recommendations. Is there a seconder for the balance of the report? Councillor Schneider, thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. So I'll now take recommendations for the additional council spot. Councillor Marsh.
Yes, it's my pleasure to move that Councillor Margaret Johnson be appointed to serve on the new WireSco board during the transition year.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I would be very supportive of Councillor Johnston for the appointment, it just for this time around, I was going to nominate Councillor Davey, especially with the merger. Having some past background of the merger process, I think would serve well for the first appointment. So I would appoint or nominate Councillor Davey.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola.
Yes, I'm pleased to nominate Councillor Gazzola for the position.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? If not, then I'll check. Councillor Gazzola, are you willing to let your name stand?
Yes, after considerable thought, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey, are you willing to let your name stand?
I am, thank you.
And Councillor Johnson, are you willing to let your name stand?
With thanks to my nominator. But you know what? I think that Councillor Singh raised some good points there. So I'll say thank you, but no thanks at this time, but I'll look forward to it in the future.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Johnson. So there are two nominations in front of us, Councillor Davey and Councillor Gazzola. As per the email from Ms. Saunderson ahead of tonight's meeting, since we're not in the council chamber, if members of council can email their vote to Ms. Saunderson, and she will receive all the votes, and then we'll read them out for the tally. So if folks can please email Ms. Saunderson now, and your choices are Councillor Davey and or Councillor Gazzola.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I will read them out, and the clerk is going to go ahead and help capture the nominee if you want to confirm at the end if we have miscounted, just to ensure. Councillor Chapman votes for Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Singh votes for Davy. Councillor Ioannidis votes for Davy. Councillor Marsh votes for Davy. Councillor Michaud votes for Davy. Councillor Schneider votes for Davy. Mayor Verbanovic votes for Davy. Councillor Davy votes for Davy. Councillor Galloway Seelock votes for Davy. Councillor Gazzola votes for Gazzola. Councillor Johnston votes for Davy. And I believe that is everyone.
That is, and Councillor Davy, you've been appointed onto the new hydro board whenever it starts meeting. And in fact, I think it's having its initial meeting on the 13th of June, if I remember correctly, which will be a hybrid meeting, and we'll go from there. So with that, thank you. Oh, I guess I need do I need a motion, Madam Clerk, to, or is that sufficient?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, ideally, if I can have a seconder, the motion would be carried.
Okay, so I need a seconder. Councillor Ioannidis, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate all of your efforts. Okay, we'll now move on to the reports of the committees, and we'll begin with Heritage Committee, and I'll turn to Councillor Gazzola.
It has been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Chapman that in accordance with Section 27-3 of the Ontario Heritage Act, the notice of intention to demolish received on March 17th, 2022 regarding the Old Men's residence located on the property, municipally addressed as 3570 King Street East, as outlined in Development Services Department Report DSD-2022-169, be received for information, and that the notice period run its course as outlined in Development Services Department DSD 2022-169, and that the city arranged to have the Old Men's residence properly documented through photographs prior to any demolition activity.
Thank you, Councillors Gazzola and Chapman for moving and seconding that. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor, oh, sorry, Councillor Davy.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment back to staff on this. I did notice that they're going to be going through and taking some photographs of this location. I just wanted to plant it in staff's ear in the future that there's really, they've come a long way in technology in terms of being able to 3D map structures that we could potentially lose forever for future application towards virtual reality and those sorts of things to really preserve. So I just wanted to plant that now because it's something that I think we should be looking at when we face situations like this.
Good idea, Councillor Davy. Thank you for sharing that. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll now move on to Finance and Corporate Services, and I'll turn it over to Councillor Galloway Seelock.
Yes, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Davy that the three items on the Finance and Corporate Services Committee be approved. Number one being the Digital Service Squad funding from 2022 to 2024. Number two being the 2022 Development Charges Study and Bylaw Public Input. And number three being the addendum report to DSD 2022-192, the Province of Ontario More Homes for Everyone Plan, Bill 109, that they be approved.
Okay, thank you. It has been moved in second, and I will be dealing with 7.2A separately because of the conflict that's been noticed. We do have some comments. Councillor Gazzola.
I really don't have a comment. I would like to ask that on the development charges, is there a way of pulling out the recommendation that the city tends to go to borrow money in the future to carry out with the development charges if sufficient funds haven't been collected by the developer? Is there some way of pulling that portion out of it? Because I will not support us going into debt for that.
I don't know if that's a question that staff can answer, or Mr. Lautenbach.
So through the mayor, the purpose of the recommendation is to really, from a statutory point of view, is to identify the committee meeting as a public meeting. In terms of the actual DC study itself, there is a report expected to come back on the 30th. Although we've referenced in the report that from a cash flow standpoint, debt might be a tool we may need to consider. There's nothing concrete in terms of what that looks like. So the report does not have a recommendation related to anything associated with debt. So I don't believe that could be pulled out of the recommendation, because the recommendation itself is specific to the statutory public meeting requirement related to the development charge study.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola, any further questions?
No, if that's impossible, then I would still ask you to call the vote on the development charges separately. And even though I agree with where they're going, I will not support it because of my concern of where it could lead to. So,
Okay, I will.
and I'd ask for a recorded vote on that, please.
Okay, I'll deal with 7.2.B separately with a recorded vote. Councillor Davey.
Yes, thank you. Just on this, just for the benefit of any viewing public, because just the debt was raised. Like I know many of us, myself included, are very debt averse. So I'd just like to ask Mr. Lautenbach on the record, this debt, would the average taxpayer, the tax base, be responsible for this debt at all?
Sorry. So through the mayor, the debt that's identified in the report in terms of cash flow needs to be fully recoverable through DC. So it's not something that the tax base would cover as part of it. And again, it is a projection. So actual requirements would be determined based on the actual cash flow that we receive in terms of DC revenue that comes in a given year.
So the developers will be paying for it?
That's right.
And they'd be covering all of the interest charges as well. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davey.
Point of order.
Point of order, go ahead.
Yeah, in response to that, I appreciate that if things work out well, that it'll be no impact on the taxpayer. Any impact for borrowing and whatnot will be paid by the development charges. My concern is having seen in prior years in the past where the economy has done tremendous downturns and development had to stop and development charges were not collected, and municipalities then had to go to their taxpayers to cover the expenditures. So that's on the basis that I am cautious of the direction that is being recommended.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gazzola. To be just for clarity, I did allow you to respond to what Councillor Davey was raising, but just so that we're all clear, that wasn't a point of order, and so, but I exercised some latitude there. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick point of clarification from staff. This was a question raised in the committee as well regarding sense of more equitable way of setting our DC charges in relation to unit size, perhaps to ensure that those have the ability to pay for it while ensuring the cost that's ultimately transferred to the end user or the purchaser of that unit stays more affordable, especially units that are smaller and more affordable. This was not the way the calculations were approached this time around. We get a confirmation from staff that in the next iteration of the review of the DC bylaw, that this approach will be taken into consideration, as some other municipalities have done as well.
Mr. Lautenbach?
So through the mayor, as indicated at the committee meeting, it will be something we could look at as part of the next DC study. I think our consultant Hemson indicated that statistics or information that we would need to look at potentially a different approach wasn't available as we went through this process, but certainly is something that we could look at as we go through the next update.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'm going to deal with 7.2A first, the digital service squad, with the noted conflict from Councillor Johnson. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. I'll then deal with 7.2C. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. And then I'll deal with 7.2B on the development charges, and a recorded vote has been called. So I'll start at the back. Sorry, I won't say the back end. I'll start at Ward 10 this time. Councillor Marsh.
In favor. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
In favor.
Councillor Johnson.
In favor.
Councillor Ioannidis.
In favor.
Councillor Singh.
In favor.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
I'm in favor.
Councillor Michaud.
In favor.
Councillor Gazzola.
Opposed.
Councillor Schneider.
In favor.
Councillor Davey.
I'm in favor.
And I'm in favor as well. So that is carried. That takes us through the committee report. So we'll move on to unfinished business. Any new business? Regional Council. Oh, sorry, Councillor Singh.
Sorry, just for new business, Mayor Vivenovic, I wanted I should have emailed ahead of time to staff to be more prepared. If they can say that they can bring this question in future meeting, that would be helpful as well. Regarding McLennan Park and some of the issues that have surrounded the bathroom facilities, and ensuring that adequate facilities will be available through the summer for this year. I just wanted to get an update from staff. If staff have anything to add now, that would be great. Or perhaps they can bring more information into future committee or council meeting.
Okay, Ms. McGoldrick.
So through the mayor, I can certainly bring back a more fulsome update. I can provide information that there will be bathroom services at McLennan Park, but in terms of the configuration of that, I can bring back more information. Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Ms. McGoldrick. When you say bathroom facilities, we have done that in the past, but they have been in the form of porta potties, which weren't necessarily something that very appreciated by the park goers. Through feedback received, perhaps information that you bring forward will clearly outline what those facilities would look like, or various options that can be available choosing by council. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Singh. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was going to do this at questions and answers, but I think this might be an appropriate time to just take a moment to thank staff, particularly Denise McGoldrick and now Lodley, for working so quickly to get the trees and the armor stone in place at the Upper Canada Park in Ward 4 to make this a safe play area for all the residents to enjoy. I can say with confidence that your quick action was very much appreciated by many parents of the young children that play there and others in the community. So I want to thank you publicly again. I've done it a lot of times, I think, this past week, but I'm very appreciative of your fast work and your support on this. Thanks so much.
Wonderful. Ms. McGoldrick. Oh, okay. You don't want to add anything?
No, just thank you, Councillor Michaud. I know you were a huge champion of this work, and we're really happy that staff are happy we could advance the plans for the park and install those measures in quick order.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'll just echo my thanks as well. I know, Councillor Michaud, you you acted quickly and staff responded quickly to a potentially difficult situation, and one that one wouldn't have necessarily expected, but clearly a couple times became a problem. And I think acting on it was as quickly as we did was the right thing to do. Just moving on briefly to the regional council update. Just a couple of things. I think some of you participated in the Chair Redmond's State of the Region last week, which occurred. Recently, the region announced 3 additional properties, one in each of the 3 urban centers that would be made available for affordable housing. And in Kitchener, the property in question is at 1388 Highland Road West. The other point is that the temporary shelters that have been in operation in the city of Kitchener have been extended from the end of April to the end of June, and regional staff continues to work with the shelter service providers and so on to look at what operations will look like beyond June 30th. So I just wanted to share that with members of council. Councillor Davey.
Yes, actually, thank you. 2 things. First, Mr. Mayor, from the all council meeting, actually, was a question that you asked about municipality providing input, and I thought I recall the answer being mid-June. So, a question of staff if they had a chance to look at that, or I'm not sure if you've related back to staff, but when I'm assuming we will be having a council session or a committee session to provide feedback before that June 15th date.
So in fact, this is on Mr. Chapman's and my agenda for tomorrow. We briefly talked about it today, but is to explore how we'll fit that into our upcoming meeting so that council has an opportunity to engage in this issue.
Okay, yeah, no problem, as long as it's on the radar. And the other item was something I find personally interesting out of the region was the plan to implement or allow essentially e-scooters on regional roads. And as you're aware, if they're allowed only on regional roads, they're not going to be able to get very far. So I just wanted confirmation from staff that we're going to see something before that. I think it's the July 1st date when the region's planning on permitting that.
Mr. Reedman.
Through the mayor, and thank you, Councillor Davey, for the heads up on this. I appreciate the advance notice, and so yes, there will be a report coming in June to this council on e-scooters and the bike share program.
Very good, thank you.
Okay, not that appearing to be it on that. We'll now move on to notices of motion. And Councillor Chapman, you have a motion on energy performance tiers.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to read it all because I don't know if my voice will get me through to the end. So I've asked the clerk to pull it up. If you want to read to the whereases, I'll try to speak to the therefores. Okay, so and before I start, I'll just say that this motion has been, or a version of it has been passed by the City of Waterloo and also by Wilmot Township. And there could be others. Those are the 2 I'm familiar with. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests the province of Ontario to include energy performance tiers and timelines for increasing minimum energy performance standards step by step to the highest energy performance tier in the next edition of the Ontario Building Code, consistent with the intent of the draft national model building code and the necessity of bold and immediate provincial action on climate change. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests the province of Ontario to adopt a more ambitious energy performance tier of the draft national model building code as a minimum requirement for the next edition of the Ontario Building Code than those currently proposed. Therefore, be it resolved that Council requests the province of Ontario encourage and provide authority to municipalities to adopt higher energy performance tiers than the Ontario Building Code and Green Development Standards. Therefore, be it further resolved that Council requests the province of Ontario to facilitate capacity education and training in the implementation of the National Model Building Code for municipal planning and building inspection staff, developers and home builders to help build capacity. And therefore be it finally resolved that this resolution be provided to the different bodies mentioned there. So.
Sorry, do I have a seconder for the motion, Councillor Chapman? Is there a seconder? Councillor Johnson, thank you. Questions, Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that this is a motion that's a copy of what's been passed by other municipalities. But at the same time, I think we have a unique opportunity to be more unique and transformative. I wanted to ask Councillor Chapman in the process of bringing this motion forward, has she conducted any consultation with the development community or with her discussion with staff? Was any consultation done beforehand? I raise this more so because, again, I support her endeavor, and again, we need to advocate for building methods that are more environmentally friendly, but it could be more quick wins that we could push along the consultation and the advocacy from the development community as well, along with our advocacy. So I asked her, and I asked the same question to staff.
Yeah, I'll just say that I have consulted with both the sustainability office and with the building staff. So in fact, there's an additional clause in here in the whereases that was added to the initial motions that came out of Waterloo and Woolwich that made it more Kitchener specific. It's the fourth whereas.
Right. So again, the same question to staff. Have we conducted any consultation with the development community as to where our advocacy can be most poignant regarding, again, technologies that can be used in the building process that are more environmentally friendly to reduce the greenhouse impact?
Mr. Reedman.
Thank you, Councillor Singh, and through the mayor. We have had ongoing conversations with the development industry over time, and so working with Sustainable Waterloo Region on dialogue on how to advance green energy standards overall. And so I know there's been some workshops with different members of the industry through that. Specifically on this, the National Building Code has been released nationwide, and my understanding is that the Ontario Building Code has 2 years to come into conformity and harmonize with the National Building Code, which is April 2024. And so there is active dialogue going on between the development industry and the province and through the development of the OPC.
And I appreciate that. So would there be active dialogue in respect to our staff in coordinating that discussion with the local development community or the different boards that our staff also liaison with so that we can, I guess, relay some of those comments and encourage as early adoption within the building code, or even encourage those practices within our local boundaries? Or do staff need a more formative direction to have more, I guess, poignant discussion with the development community?
Through the mayor, and so we do have monthly meetings with the development industry through our liaison committee, and my understanding is Mr. Sealing has been in dialogue with the industry on the changes and what's being proposed at the national level through that work.
Can council direct staff to, I guess, report back to council with some of the recommendations that are coming from that building community in respect to the building code and the recommendations that are being proposed through this advocacy, so that we can be in a better know of some of the needs and wants of the building community, and as I said, that we can formulate future advocacy work from this council as well.
Through the chair, so I do have some high-level comments right now, and so there are 5 steps in the National Building Code, and so step 1 is the minimum code, which everything is compared against. Step 2 is about 10% more efficient than that. Step 3 is 20% more efficient than the minimum code. Step 4 is about 40% more efficient, and my understanding is the building industry is confident that in the next 2 years they can achieve step 3. But going beyond that right now is a little bit more challenging. So step 4 is generally meets or exceeds ASHRAE's targets for net zero. So, by 2030, that's where the National Building Code fully kicks in. And so that's where net zero is the minimum building code standard. And so there's some work to do to get there. But with current technology, there's an ability to achieve step 3. And so this is that tiered response at the national level to sort of ratchet up towards net zero by 2030 to meet our mission goals.
Thank you. And that helps. So would those comments be relayed along with this motion to the province?
Through the chair, so I'm happy to work with Mr. Sealing to see what comments we can formalize through the local development industry and pass back to the province.
Mr. Mayor, I would, if amendment is necessary or recommendation, I put forward that staff work towards that, so those comments can be relayed to the province as well. Thank you.
I think what we'll do is we'll deal with the motion. I don't think this is really an amendment, and I'll simply take it as a motion to direct staff to do the work that's been requested. So I'll come back to you on that. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mayor Urbanovic. I do like where this is going. I'm just wondering the timing of this, of the motion, because we are under an election time right now, and as far as I know, when we're dealing with the building code right now, that's discussions and all that stuff publicly won't be forming until at least the fall, anyways. So I'm just wondering whether or not this makes more sense to defer this until the fall, when discussions actually open up and when we know with definitive who will be the Minister of Municipal Affairs, and this is just not going to be sitting on a desk for 2-3 months.
So what I would suggest, I mean, it's obviously Council's will, and Councillor Chapman as the mover of the motion. At this point in time, even though there technically still is a Minister of Municipal Affairs, I think if we adopted it, we would wait to correspond with the province on this until after the election and until after the new cabinet is appointed, because really the roles that cabinet is in right now is really in terms of a caretaker mode for the province until the new cabinet is approved.
Okay, I'm fine with that, as long as it's not sitting on a desk for 2 months.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. So with that, Councillor Chapman, you've made the motion. I'm sorry. Did I ask for a seconder earlier? I can't. I did. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Johnson. So all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Councillor Singh, you're moving your additional direction. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Schneider, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That too is carried. Questions and answers.
Mr. Mayor, I'm sorry, I jumped in for new business. It should have been questions and answers when I asked her regarding the McLennan Park. I was.
That's fine. No worries. No worries. Councillor Michaud jumped in as well, so that worked out fine. We'll move into the bylaws. Oh, sorry, Councillor Gazzola.
I'm not sure how to put this. It's the question I was wondering if we were going to have a moment's silence at this meeting tonight in respect of former Councillor Wiley that passed away just recently.
Councillor Gazzola, my intent on that would be to do it closer to the memorial. That will be taking place in June, which will also be when the flags will be lowered at City Hall to recognize that. Would that be amenable to you?
Well, that's fine. That's
yep.
I would like to know that. Or
yep.
Sure.
We haven't forgotten about it, but thank you for raising that, Councillor Gazzola. Moving on to the readings of the bylaws. Do I have a mover and seconder for first and second reading of the bylaws? Moved by Councillor Chapman, seconded by Councillor Ioannidis. that lead be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and that the same be taken as read a first and second time and stand referred to committee of the whole. Madam Clerk, are there any additional bylaws?
To Mr. Mayor, there are none.
Okay, so with those being moved and seconded, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Committee of the whole, it's been moved that council resolve itself into the committee of the whole. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis, seconded by Councillor Chapman. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Marsh, over to you.
All right. Thank you, Mayor Vrbanovic. Do we have a mover for the remaining administrative reports that have not been dealt with already? I see Councillor Johnston. Are there any questions? So just to be clear, we're talking about, we've already dealt with the two Kitchener Power Corporation motions, and now we're looking at the BIA budgets and the housekeeping. Well, let's start with the BIA budgets. Are there any questions about those? Any comments? All right, all those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next, we have the housekeeping confirmatory bylaw from November 2020. There just was a motion that needed to be passed that wasn't, and now we're just cleaning that up. Staff have also requested an amendment to this recommendation to include an additional clause that this bylaw be given first and second reading. So do we have a mover for this bylaw as amended? Mayor Vrbanovic, any questions? Oh, I can't see everybody anymore. Hold on. Oh, there we go. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. All right. And any further questions? All right. So seeing none, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Galloway Sealog that the proceedings and the recorded pecuniary interests and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes be and the same are hereby adopted and confirmed.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Someone to move third reading of the bylaws. Councillor Galloway Sealog, seconded by Councillor Chapman. And I presume, Madam Clerk, that would include that extra confirmatory bylaw, correct?
That is correct, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And before we adjourn, I just want to remind council that we need to go back in camera after the end of the meeting. So motion to adjourn the council meeting. Councillor Ioannidis, Councillor Michaud, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And thank you to everyone for joining us this evening.